Alright, so that was the intro cutscene to Bloodborne. Let me know if my mic audio quality is alright so far.
Oh, yeah. Pale blood.
Thanks.
Well, you've come to the right place. Yharnam is the home of blood ministration. You need only unravel its mystery. But where's an outsider like yourself to begin? Easy, with a bit of Yharnam blood of your own. But first, you'll need a contract.
Alright, so one thing to note about the Blood Minister's line, when he says, "Oh yes, pale blood," he's responding to an off-screen inquiry made by our hunter. So in other words, we're the first ones to bring up pale blood, which means we had some kind of knowledge of what it was before even coming to Yharnam, although it's pretty well unclear what that was. The contract that we're going to be signing is also a bit unclear in nature. Some people think it's a covenant with the moon presence itself, and that the Blood Minister is an emissary for the moon. Unfortunately, his assets are reused, so you can see that exact same Blood Minister appear in the Hunter's Nightmare in the DLC. The default Huntsman mob wheelchair folk also look exactly like him, except of course they're lacking the hat that he's wearing. I'm not sure what starting class I want to do. Some people are concerned about the lore of the protagonist and they want to know where they came from. I'm personally not too invested in this because I view the main characters of the Soulsborne games as a bit of a blank slate and it doesn't really matter too much. A lot of people like to assume that the lone survivor could be related to the fishing hamlet that we see in the DLC, although I think it's a good headcanon. It's not exactly canon, so to speak. It's just something that players can interpret for their own characters. Not sure what starting class I want to do. Probably something a bit more skill intensive. I don't really feel like being a waste of skin right now just because it's a lore playthrough, and if I die more often on stream it'll be a little bit embarrassing, but it's okay. I haven't played in a while. I think I'll just go with the Violent Past because there's a decent amount of vitality and maybe not. Let's go with the Troubled Childhood just because the endurance is already pretty high and it has a little bit of skill. And the appearance, I'll just go with the default appearance and finalize our contract.
Good. All signed and sealed. Now, let's begin the transfusion. Oh, don't you worry. Whatever happens, you may think it all a mere bad dream.
So immediately after being transfused the blood, we awaken to a nightmare in which a beast is crawling towards us from a puddle of blood, representing the beasthood inherent within humanity. As it draws near, it seems to beckon towards us and then suddenly catches on fire. Immediately after, we've got some skeletal, ghostly white figures begin to crawl over us. They're called messengers, and in Japanese, the term used for messenger, shisha, is a homophone and can also sound the same as the word for a deceased person. And it's very likely that these messengers
You found yourself a hunter.
are already deceased or are the spirits of the dead, and they seem to be the ones who beckon the protagonist, or the hunter as I'll call them, to the dream. And that voiceover that we hear is from the doll. I'm going to turn the HUD on just because I'm bad and can't tell if I'm going to die soon. And so we awaken to Yosefka's clinic in a dark room with not a whole lot going on. We were on an operating table of some sort. It's presumably the same one where we got our blood transfusion, although we don't see the blood minister nearby. We can't access the back room yet, and the only thing worth note besides all of the medical equipment here is this note on a chair. It says, handwritten scroll, seek pale blood to transcend the hunt. Thank you, Soda. One interesting difference between this and the Japanese version of the note is, rather than just saying handwritten scroll, I believe the Japanese is a bit more explicit in saying that it's the protagonist's handwriting. Yeah, it's possible the Blood Minister became the wolf in the intro, but I don't think that's exactly likely just because it comes out of the ground. Of course, it could all be metaphorical. It could also be that the Blood Minister is going to be the Scourge of Beast in the room we see over there. So with this note being written by the protagonist, it also reinforces that we are the ones who brought up pale blood to the Blood Minister. It might also imply that we had some kind of foresight that we would have a form of amnesia or some kind of memory loss following the blood transfusion. The other notable thing about this note is when it's saying to seek pale blood to transcend the hunt, pale blood is supposed to be an explicit reference to the moon presence, although no one's going to be able to understand that on their first playthrough, so it takes a thorough understanding of the lore and examining the notes and descriptions we find throughout the game to unlock that kind of mystery. And pale blood is a reference to the moon presence because, well, of a note in the lecture hall. It's not exactly a name, it's kind of a descriptor of what the moon presence is, or possibly its function throughout the game. Yeah, it's very unclear why we know about pale blood. It's probably just the MacGuffin to keep the player invested in trying to figure out this mystery beyond, the whole gameplay elements. And with pale blood, the term comes from aozamatachi, which is more closely literally translated as paled blood, or blood that has gone pale. The implication of that could be that if you have normal blood, once it gets drained, it becomes pale blood. And that could be a kind of hint as to the nature of the moon presence, as to how we're going to go through our journey and get to the end of the game, only to potentially have our blood drained by the moon presence. I'm not exactly sure that it's a remnant of the alpha version of the story, because There are definitely a lot of changes for sure, like with the role of Lawrence and Mikolash kind of getting juxtaposed, but it's also unclear whether or not the retail version was intended to be that or just kind of a placeholder to get people interested in the demo. I said retail version, but yeah, like the demo version. Yeah, it's unclear if that demo gameplay was just something that they added for the sake of the demo and wasn't ever really supposed to be part of the story. So yeah, that's pretty much the first note of the game. Written by us, telling us to seek the moon presence to transcend the hunt, and transcend really just means complete. Just a little bit of a localization flair to kind of hint at the third ending. There's not too much going around in the next room. We get some developer notes, and all of the notes are held by messengers, so potentially not of this world, or maybe perhaps normal people can't see them. As we go into the next room, we've got some more operating tables and what looks to be a Scourge Beast. I guess I can't zoom. Sorry about that. I don't know if my audio cut out. I was trying to use like the accessibility features to zoom because I know the screen can be kind of small. So apparently you can't really do that in broadcasting mode. So there's a Scourge Beast chomping on some figures on the floor. We can see that its health bar is already pretty well drained. It's unclear if it was in a fight. Perhaps it fought those two people and got wounded as they went. So you believe the Blood Minister left a note there to give us the goal to go with for the hunt. My only real disagreement with that would just be that in the Japanese it's more clearly that it's your own handwriting for that note. Alright, so it's scripted to turn around. I get hit because I'm a baddie. It's gonna take me a minute to get used to this after playing Dark Souls. Killing the Scourge of Beast gets us 3 blood vials, although it's kind of a randomized drop. There's a body in the next room, has some blood vials. I would look at the description right now, but we can't because of the way that they're held within the inventory. Yeah, so if you die to that Scourge Beast, it's not a big deal. It's almost like a scripted death. It'll just take you immediately to the Hunter's Dream. The one difference is if you go to the Hunter's Dream at this point in the game before you open the gate, the workshop will be closed, so you couldn't talk to Gehrman or really do anything interesting there. It's just an abandoned doll. A body out here has 10 Quicksilver Bullets, and leaving Josefka's clinic, we can see we're in what appears to be a kind of graveyard with statues strewn about all willy-nilly, and there's no real rhyme or reason or logic to the layout. The gate towards the back of the clinic is closed, of course, and the gate to the front towards central Yharnam can actually be opened, leaving us only one way to go without using glitches and sequence breaking. No, Yosefka doesn't spawn until you die because you're in the room in which she'll be, so the back room is automatically closed. So first you need to like reload the area or go to the Hunter's Dream in order to get Josefka to appear. So once we leave Josefka's clinic, we can see there's carriages and chained up coffins everywhere, random top hat that you can't pick up and wear. The reason why these coffins could be chained would be there's a potential for the dead to come back to life, and people didn't want them to reanimate or come back as beasts but on the night of the hunt, although that's just pure conjecture. It could also be that people don't want the remains of their family members being looted for things like incense or grave robbers in general, since that seems to be a big theme in Yharnam. It's unclear. There's a good amount of extrapolation we could do, but there's no clear answers, unfortunately. Some more blood vials on that corpse. If we look down, we can see in the distance the Church of the Good Chalice right there above my character model's head. And above it is the Great Bridge where the Cleric Beast will jump down to. And then that's the Cathedral Ward. Some benches, making it seem more like a city. Some more coffins. The nature of Yharnam makes it questionable as to whether or not we're actually in reality or a nightmarish hellscape, just because of how little it makes sense. And of course there's a carcass of a horse pulling a carriage. How that really works, because none of the areas truly connect to each other, is a mystery. And if you're not paying attention and just trying to go to the next gates, it's very easy to get snuck up on by this patrolling Yharnamite. It does very, very little damage, because I have fists, so I'll just kind of ignore him for now. Pull the lever. I got lucky. Visceral attacks are overpowered in this game. There's no backstabs like in Dark Souls, so you have to charge up your attack first and get it off. Now the first time you go up this ladder, you'll hear the scream of the Cleric Beast coming from the Great Bridge, which is supposed to foreshadow what's to come. And then up here is the lantern that will give us access to the Hunter's Dream without dying. And the prompt says, "This lamp now transports you back to the Hunter's Dream. Upon death you will awaken at this lamp." And as we go there, we talk to the messengers, well, not messengers, and it seems to be their influence which pulls us into the dream. Do you think that's when the Cleric Beast transforms? Possibly. Haven't really thought about it, but the whole point of it is just to foreshadow what's to come. After accessing the lamp, we wake up in a haze to the Hunter's Dream, with a white moon over the workshop. I'll go to the lanterns when I leave the dream, just so we can look at it as we go. Upon awakening to the Hunter's Dream, we can see a bunch of gravestones coming off to the side, steps, a lantern, and a doll, although we can't really interact with her yet. Inspecting her just reveals that it's an abandoned doll. Going to the gravestones over here, we see messengers coming out of the base of it, and when we interact with it, we can awaken at a selected location in Yharnam. We can use these gravestones to transport ourselves back to the waking world, so to speak, and right now we have the first floor sick room and central Yharnam to go to. The way that dreams work in Bloodborne is a bit of an enigma, because while they do seem like alternate realities, they are made out of dreams. I know that sounds a bit redundant, but it becomes significant to the lore because dreams in this game act as a medium between consciousness and unconsciousness, which both serve as metaphors for life and death. And since dreams exist between life and death, I like to call them a kind of middle ground between life and death. And since the hunter cannot truly die over the course of the night, it's because they're being sustained by the dream. And going up the steps to the workshop, we can see messengers holding items, and I do appreciate that we can actually see like the models for it. So you can see like the little axe, the cleaver, and the cane, and we can accept the gift from them. The messengers offer you a trick weapon. Choose one. Trick weapons are wielded with the right hand and employed in beast hunting. I'm going to go with the cane, just because I'm the most familiar with it. I like it quite a bit. The second set are holding two guns, the pistol and the blunderbuss. I should have read the descriptions while I was at it. My fault. And then the last set of messengers offers us the notebook. A notebook received from messengers. Leave messages with these loyal servants to share them with hunters in other worlds. Sorry, it's a little bit difficult for me to read this right now just because the extra layout makes my screen smaller. And then once we come inside the hunter's workshop, we can see a whole bunch of books strewn about, mostly about how to pick up fair maidens, and what looks to be like blood vials all around the storage, and an old man in a wheelchair, some candles on an altar, and some weapons around a workbench which we can use to upgrade our items and weapons. For now, let's just talk to Gehrman, see what's up.
Aha! You must be the new hunter. Welcome to the hunter's dream. This will be your home for now. I am Gehrman, friend to you hunters. You're sure to be in a fine haze about now, but don't think too hard about all of this. Just go out and kill a few beasts. It's for your own good. You know, it's just what hunters do. You'll get used to it.
So, one of the more interesting aspects about Gehrman's introduction right there is his seeming to have trouble either remembering or saying his name. This could be a potential foreshadowing that he's been captivated or possessed by the moon presence, that he isn't fully in control of his faculties. It also helps that he's an old man, so it could just be that he is so old and speaks with people so little that he doesn't even really think about his personal identity. Another interesting aspect about Gehrman is if you look on the left side of his screen, he's got a little peg leg where his right leg used to be, and he's holding a cane. This peg leg is important because in the second ending of the game, when we get captivated by the moon presence ourselves, we end up in most likely his wheelchair, and we're also missing a leg, although it happens to be our left. This may imply that once the moon presence grabs the player and consumes them and captivates them and possesses them, a kind of deal is struck and they take our leg as well and keep us suspended in the dream indefinitely until potentially a new hunter releases us from the cycle, if we can even be that optimistic that it would happen again. Going back to the storage, I'll examine the description for the blood vials and the Quicksilver Bullets since we couldn't before. Blood vial. Special blood used in administration. Restores HP. Once a patient has had their blood administered a unique but common treatment in Yharnam, successive infusions recall the first and are all the more invigorating for it. No surprise that most Yharnamites are heavy users of blood. I personally don't really care for this description very much because I think it has a decent amount of information that's been lost in the localization process. Uh, One of the more unclear lines I would say would be that the successive infusions are called the first and are all the more invigorating for it. The Japanese is clear in that it says, by taking the blood of Yharnam, you'll get a sensation of life power from the same kind of blood transfusion fluid. So, by taking the same kind of blood, you'll get a rush of the will to live, and a literal high on life, which many citizens of Yharnam become addicted to. And the Quicksilver Bullets. Special bullets used with hunter firearms. Ordinary bullets have no effect on beasts, and so Quicksilver Bullets, fused with the wielder's own blood, must be employed. The strength of Quicksilver Bullets depends greatly upon the wielder's blood tinge. Yeah, I was going to get to the willpower concept in a minute. Well, the will is your kind of vitality, and I'll just go to it now. If you go to your stat page and go to the help option and put it over or will to survive for your HP. If this falls to 0, your strength will fade away, and it doesn't exactly work out in English, but the way that Blood Echoes is said in Japanese, it's closer to the dying wills of blood. And this concept of willpower being imbued through the blood is supposed to tie directly into the HP mechanic. And so Blood Echoes are essentially like the form of currency within Bloodborne, and it's all essentially just willpower. So by taking the blood of the dead, you're absorbing the wills of the dead. Blood vials use the same kind of blood as the dead, so when you're restoring your HP through drinking the blood, you're really getting an influx of the will to live and survive and to struggle and overcome adversity. Oh yeah, that's a good observation, Rubito. If we look at the blood bullet or Quicksilver Bullet icon, it does appear to be a fingerprint, and a blood-soaked one at that, which kind of just shows that these mercurial bullets are infused with blood, and because of that, they're not fully solid. We can see it melting, and it's not entirely clear exactly where the relation between blood and mercury lies. It becomes very suspicious being able to take our own blood and form Quicksilver Bullets without any other extra ingredients when we use our emergency bullet supply. Brotherhood of the Wolf. Yeah, I haven't seen that yet, but I've heard that Bloodborne took a lot of inspiration from it. Now, I know I'm jumping around a bit, and I apologize for that. So, the other thing that Gehrman mentioned was for us to just go out and hunt some beasts and kill some without really thinking about it. And I think that kind of contradicts a note that we can find nestled in the corner of the room. To escape this dreadful hunter's dream, halt the source of the spreading scourge of beasts, lest the night carry on forever. While Gehrman is familiar with Lawrence, it's not entirely clear if he's like a lieutenant or a partner, so to speak. Their relationship is certainly close because later on in the game you can hear Gehrman calling out to Lawrence for help to free him from the hunter's dream, but it's not entirely clear how it came. There's a little bit of context missing in one of Willem's lines in the flashback with Lawrence where he says, "You think now to betray me." In Japanese he says, "You also think to betray me." And so I think this is supposed to hint to us that it was Garin as the first person to betray Willem, because when Garin's sleeping and calls out for Lawrence, he'll also call out for Willem as well. So with Garin telling us to just go out and kill some beasts indiscriminately, I think that contradicts some of the message of this note, where it says, we must halt the source of the spreading scourge of beasts. It's initially unclear what that means, but the way that this Night of the Hunt is working, the School of Mensis is using the cries of Murgo to beckon the moon presence, and potentially other great ones as well. And once the moon presence has been attracted to Yharnam, it creates the phenomenon of the red moon appearing over Yharnam, which causes people to transform in uncontrollable numbers. We get information related to this when we look at the items and notes that talk about Old Yharnam and the red moon that appeared there. When it appeared there in the past, the Scourge of Beast was so bad, the Healing Church decided to just abandon the town and burn it to the ground rather than trying to control the outbreak. So, the source of the spreading Scourge of Beast for tonight is technically the cries of the infant Murgo, the Nightmare Newborn. So in order to stop the source of the spreading scourge, we must put a stop to Murgo's cries. And this will solve the requirements to meet the first two endings. Like, once you stop Murgo from crying, the moon presence will lose interest in coming closer to Yharnam, and then it'll go away, which will arguably save the town, if you can really call it that. And then, of course, in the third ending, we challenge the moon presence directly and kill it, so that will also serve to halt the spreading scourge of beasts. And that's the way that we end our Night of the Hunts. Although it's not necessarily, that doesn't necessarily mean that each Night of the Hunt is the same. It's arguable that our Night of the Hunt is a lot worse than most other Nights of the Hunt because of the red moon and the moon presence, which are linked. Willem has no friends. It's the nature of being a teacher, I guess. And so next to that note, we have this statue, which I find really interesting because it seems connected to the Thumerians to some degree. It's what's on like the doors in the Chalice dungeons that allows us access to like the boss areas and stuff like that. No, Soda, you're right. Like the cries don't necessarily cause the scourge. It's how close the moon presence is. However, the moon presence is being brought closer because of the cries, which are attracting it. And while the moon presence isn't necessarily like the only source of the Scourge of Beasts, it's what's influencing Yharnam the most for this Night of the Hunt. And so, while beasthood is inherent within man, it doesn't seem as though killing the moon presence will fully get rid of beasthood. It's just the catalyst for things going wrong tonight in particular.
This was once a safe haven for hunters. A workshop where hunters used blood to enhance their weapons and flesh. We don't have as many tools as we once did, but you're welcome to use whatever you find. Even the doll, should it please you.
And of course, the even the doll should it please you line is definitely creepy as hell, but he's hinting that once we gain enough insight, we'll be able to interact with the doll and she'll be able to provide aid to the hunter throughout the hunt. And maybe have sexual relations with it ourselves. I personally don't like that reading for obvious reasons, but can't exactly get the lore community's minds out of the gutter. Yeah, so with the things with Kanehurst, Yamamura, and Volter, it is definitely a very good hint that like the whole problem of beasthood is not just central to Yharnam itself.
This was once a safe haven for hunters. The work.
And then with the workshop tools, we would be able to access being able to inscribe Carol runes into us in the memory altar, or being able to upgrade our weapons and things like that. And at the workbench, we can fortify weapons, repair them, although right now, since we just got our weapons, it's not really feasible for us to do. Leaving the workshop, we can see more graves. This one may have been Maria's grave, just because we see the doll praying to it often. It's where we get the old hunter bone, and it was supposed to be the grave of one of the apprentices for Gehrman. A German spy has said that originally, like, the old hunter bone is supposed to link up to Flora, who was Gehrman's apprentice, but that kind of got cut from the game, and Flora, her role has just kind of been more or less retconned. And of course, Flora is an alternate name for the Moon Presence, which is definite food for thought, even if that's not what came in the final version of the game. This would be where we could normally talk to messengers to purchase things with insight, and this has an interesting line that I would like to bring some attention to. This path appears linked to the Nightmare, but there are no messengers. Within the English localization of the game, the Hunter's Dream is pretty consistently referred to the Hunter's Dream. However, in the Japanese, on occasion there will be lines that calls it a nightmare as well, like the Hunter's Nightmare, and while it does share the same name as like the DLC location, it becomes a bit more ambiguous as to whether or not the Hunter's Dream is separate from the Hunter's Nightmare or the Nightmare Frontier or any of the other areas that we visit later on. I don't necessarily think just like this grave symbolizes all the old hunters. The doll will tell us like all of the graves, so like these ones over here, the ones over there, and then of course like all of the gravestones like lining the walls that we can't really see in, like, I don't know what to call it, the garden area. And then of course we get some more dev notes about telling us the mechanics of the game. So with the messengers being linked to the Nightmare and the Insight Bath being in the Hunter's Dream, it does call into question whether or not the Hunter's Dream is also part of a nightmare. And with a note about the localizations, this note in the corner, rather than calling it a dreadful hunter's dream, it's more like the provocative hunter's nightmare in Japanese. This phrasing makes me think it's connected to Gehrman, because later on in the game, in the Japanese version of the game, he also calls the hunter's dream a provocative hunter's nightmare. And so it almost makes me think Gehrman was the one who penned this note, even though it's held by messengers. And of course in the back there's not too much going on, a whole bunch of white flowers, which are everywhere in the dream, and a messenger stump, which is empty. It's also linked to the nightmare, and there are also no messengers. And so, going back to what I said towards the beginning of the stream when the messengers first appeared crawling over our bodies, the fact that they're called Shisha in Japanese, which does mean messenger or emissary, but it's also synonymous with dead person, it links the idea that things like blood, messengers, dreams, all of this are connected to the concept of death and the afterlife, and dreams, or the hunter's dream and the nightmares, could act as a kind of afterlife or purgatory. And while it is kind of a separate dimension, it's still connected to the reality of Yharnam and the world of Bloodborne. now that I think we've pretty much exhausted all we can say about the Hunter's Dream for now, we're going to go back to Central Yharnam. Or no, I'll go to the sick room first. If I did the chalices, it would be maybe one with like a higher level save character, just because they get really redundant. I would probably just show off a bit of the architecture, some insights as to Thumerian culture as a result of that. But I also just don't really have the stomach to go through all of them again. I've done it twice, and it's 2 times more than enough. Alright, so we go back to the clinic and go back up to the room which we woke up in. Although right now the door is closed and instead it says talk. If we try to look through, we can see the figure of a woman in white. She's not holding any weapons, which shows this is the true Yosefka. And I believe Lance, McDonald, and others have pointed out that her head won't track us through the door, whereas the fake Yosefka will. Oh yeah, there's definitely a lot of connections between Thurbu and K-Nurse, which would be something that I would show if I were to show off a Chalice dungeon. Thanks, Dark Moon. Hopefully I'm not so terrible at the game that I'll need to summon, but I'll definitely keep that in mind, and I appreciate the offer.
Are you out on the hunt? Then I'm very sorry, but I cannot open this door. I am Yosefka. The patients here in my clinic must not be exposed to infection. I know that you hunt for us, for our town, but I'm sorry. Please. This is all that I can do.
So we talked to the real Yosefka. She says she will not open the door because she doesn't want her patients to be exposed to infection. Which, I mean, if you know what's really going on behind there aren't any patients, which is kind of a funny statement. It could just be like an allusion to the guy in the back that's turning into a celestial emissary. It's very unclear whether or not the real Yosefka has any hand in those kind of experiments, so to speak. She offers us her blood vial.
Now, go. And good hunting.
Hey, Wenders, thanks for dropping by, man. And reading Yosefka's blood vial. It's a blood vial acquired from Yosefka's clinic. This refined blood, highly invigorating, restores a large amount of HP. The product of a slow and careful refinement process, this rare blood vial appears to be a clinic original. Yeah. Having a lot more trouble reading since the screen's smaller with this overlay. Yeah, and Soda brings up a good point. The false Yosefka doesn't really introduce herself. I suppose we'll get to that in a bit later. So Yosefka's blood vial, it's a clinic original, and it's not entirely clear how it came to be, or like the refinement process. My thoughts on it are that it's probably like blood plasma that's been taken from old blood to create something a bit more effective than just normal blood vials. Although that's just conjecture and there's nothing really backing that up. I think it's just supposed to be what's implied with its yellow color as opposed to red.
Are you still in need of something? But I have nothing more to offer. Please, try to understand my position. I can only pray for a fruitful hunt. Are you still in need? But please, I can...
Her English dialogue is pretty close to what's in Japanese. I think there's just like some... No, maybe there weren't even any gender differences. I don't quite remember off the top of my head. I know that if one were to drink 5 of her blood vials, you'll get like some special dialogue towards the end of it. Let me look it up real quick. I don't really feel like taking the time to drink 5 of them on stream and then go through it. So I think it's after you drink 5, she'll say, "This night is long, but morning always comes. Someone of your caliber won't fail us, I am certain. And once the night of the hunt ends, we can speak face to face. Then I can finally see what you look like. I shouldn't be thinking this, but I am rather looking forward to it, so please, be careful out there." Yeah, so she'll say that whether or not the hunter is male or female. I was hoping that there was like a little bit of like a lost information in that she says something different in Japanese to both genders, but it ends up being the same. The English sounds a bit more distant, but I feel like the Japanese makes it sound as though she's got more of a romantic interest in the hunter. And going back through the clinic, we don't see the Scourge Beast anymore. If we examine the corpses of what it was feasting on, we can see that these don't exactly look like normal people. If you look closely, the left arm is a lot longer than their right arm. They're covered in fur and blood, obviously, but it just shows that the people of Yharnam have already been undergoing transformations. Whether or not this is a complete transformation is a bit of a mystery. We don't really see them having more progressive transformations as the game goes. So it could be that people who've only taken a relatively small amount of the blood or don't resist their inner beasthood don't fully transform like we see the Scourge Beast that was feasting upon them to begin with. Yeah, I was going to talk to Gilbert, thank you. And look at that, the lantern again. R1 spam for the win, baby. So the common Yharnamites, the huntsman minions, so to speak, are also partially transformed. They all have got super long left arms, which is maybe why they're so awkward when they're approaching us. Although it really fascinates me that the ones wielding guns and things can still shoot accurately. And just to compare, while that Yharnamite is grotesquely transformed, the corpse over here still looks pretty human. And this area for the first time, if you get caught, it's supposed to be a kind of environmental hint to be aware of corners and to remain vigilant. And speaking of remaining vigilant, if you come closer here, you see these Yharnamites just come up from the ground and then they'll begin to attack us. So if you don't know about it, it's pretty easy to get caught unaware, because that guy right there, he almost looks similar to some of the corpses that are already lying down. And you can lock on beforehand if you know about it, but it's just one of the environmental features that I like about Bloodborne. And of course, in the corner, it's telling you to search for every nook and cranny for things that can be of use to you. Molotov cocktail. Explodes in raging flames when thrown against an object. One of the oldest hunter tools available in the workshop. Since the tragedy that struck old Yharnam, fires have become a staple in beast hunts and is thought to cleanse impurity. Certain types of beasts have an abnormal fear of flame. I think this description is really interesting because it will contradict some dialogue that we'll hear from players, or not players, but NPCs later in the game. Characters like Eileen, Amelia, Lawrence, and Willem, they all seem to be focused on a component of fear that's supposed to be important in keeping man distinct from beasts, but not even 5 minutes into the game, if you're playing it normally, you can get the Molotov cocktail, which points out that certain beasts do have fear, and they fear flame, which shows that fear doesn't necessarily separate man from beast. Which old Yharnam guys do you mean, Wenders? Like oh man, what are they called? The beast patients? And of course, going up the second time, we do not hear the Cleric Beast. Oh, you're talking about Gilbert with the flame sprayer? So yeah, going back to the idea of the lanterns, they've got bells on them, as well as the messengers that'll spawn beneath them. Huh. I don't know why they're not appearing right now. Maybe it's because I'm offline. So, yeah. Yeah, if you're connected online and there's a lot of players in an area, there'll be more messengers around the base of the lanterns. So, going back to, like, the bells, in Japanese culture and, like, Buddhism in general, bells are often used to kind of be able to resonate with the dead. So you can use them to, like, call the attention of spirits, whether, like, positively or negatively. And that's a really big recurring theme throughout Bloodborne. The power of bells and their ability for their sounds to transcend dimensions and things like that. Instinctive fear and learned or intellectual fear? That's a pretty good question. How do you pronounce that? Like Baros Igati? I think there is a difference between instinctive fear and intellectual fear, at least for like the Lovecraftian perspective of the game. Like, I think the amygdala being connected to fear and something primal that'll like incite like the fight or flight trigger is definitely something that's supposed to be brought up in conjunction with things like the frenzy mechanic and stuff like that. And learned fear is definitely interesting, and I think even though it's less primal, it would probably be more tied to the willpower aspect of playing the game. Although, as I said before, like fear doesn't necessarily separate beast from man, so it's a good question for sure. Right, and with the lanterns, they do metaphorically and literally light the way, so there's that as well. And of course, there's the whole imagery between going towards the light or the away from the light with the afterlife and things like that. I'm not entirely sure like Bloodborne was trying to lift that idea, but it's probably just something that's supposed to be more similar to the Dark Souls mechanic of having bonfires for people to look forward to, because originally the warp lanterns were supposed to be warp chairs, which you can like look at one of Lance McDonald's cut content videos where he was able to restore a warp chair and able to transport himself to the hunter's dream using a chair and having an animation where the character sits down and goes to sleep, which makes it more of a literal way to enter the dream or the nightmare. And it's a little bit unfortunate that imagery got cut, because it'll also appear over the altar with Lawrence's skull. There's a gigantic chair on top of it, which I believe is supposed to represent the dream, and we don't really get that kind of context in the retail version of the game, unfortunately. And then, speaking of the importance of lanterns, these buildings that have the lit lanterns next to them will show that there's supposed to be an NPC that one can interact with.
Oh, you must be a hunter. And not one from around here either. I'm Gilbert, a fellow outsider. You must have had a fine time of it. Yharnam has a special way of treating guests. Well, I don't think I could stand if I wanted to, but I'm willing to help if there's anything that can be done. This town is cursed. Whatever your reasons might be, you should plan a swift exit. Whatever can be gained from this place, it will do more harm than good.
Can Gilbert be considered the crestfallen warrior of this game? Yeah, maybe. That role isn't really there, although, of course, it's unclear whether or not Gilbert partook in hunting or anything like that, despite carrying the flame sprayer. I don't think it's a terrible comparison at all.
Pale blood, you say? Never heard of it. But if it's blood you're interested in, you should try the Healing Church. The church controls all knowledge on blood ministration and all varieties of blood. Across the valley to the east of Yharnam lies the town of the Healing Church, known as the Cathedral Ward. And deep within Cathedral Ward is the old Grand Cathedral, the birthplace of the Healing Church's special blood. Or so they say. Yharnamites don't share much with outsiders. Normally they wouldn't let you near the place, but the hunt is on tonight. This might be your chance.
So Gilbert gives us a lot of good information, even if it isn't necessarily useful information. One of the first things that he mentions is across the valley to the east of Yharnam lies the Cathedral Ward. It's a little bit of a weird statement because the sun sets in the west, at least on Earth, and it almost seems as though the Cathedral Ward is in the same direction of the sun in the evening. So it's a little bit, it does call into question whether or not it's a development oversight, whether or not there's supposed to be the sun is supposed to be in a different direction to begin with, or whether or not they should have changed the direction that Gilbert was speaking about, whether the map got rearranged throughout development. It's not entirely clear. It could also just be that our player character is not seeing reality correctly, which is going to be more of an issue that becomes revealed later in the game once we defeat Ram and the Red Moon gets revealed. To the east of where Gilbert is talking about means the direct route towards the Cathedral Ward is the Great Bridge. So within the context of the game itself, he's directing us to the Cleric Beast, even though neither of us know about it. And the other notable thing about his dialogue is he responds to an off-screen inquiry from us where we bring up pale blood to him, even if we don't read the lore note within Josefka's clinic. So it does seem, even if we ignore all of the contextual clues given to us throughout the game, the hunter does have some objective in mind in seeking pale blood beyond what's immediately presented to us. It's one of the few things that we remember. And Gilbert is able to identify that we're a foreigner. It could just be that whoever's a dreamlit hunter or a moonlit hunter or a dreaming hunter, they may have all been foreigners at some point. Eileen wears foreign material. Gascoigne is from a foreign land. They don't have the title of father within the Healing Church, things like that. And so let's examine the foreigner set, which kind of does set up some of our background, although a bit poorly. Black Hood. Hood worn upon awakening to the nightmare of blood and beasts. Perhaps it's where I had to stay out of sight and travel by cover of darkness. Without memory, who will ever know? The Foreign Garb is a little bit more detailed, and it says that it's clothing worn upon awakening to the nightmare of the blood and beasts, of course. Not typical clothing for Yharnam, perhaps it is of foreign origin. It is said, after all, the traveler came to Yharnam from afar. Without memory, who will ever know? And with the sullied bandages, bandage worn upon awakening to the nightmare of blood and beasts, terribly worn and unsanitary. A faint memory recalls blood ministration following the transfusion of unknown blood, not long after the nightmare began. And then the trousers are similar to the garb. One of the things that I'd like to highlight about this set in particular is that first line about awakening to the nightmare of blood and beasts makes it sound as though after waking up from Yosefka's clinic, we've awakened to a nightmare of blood and beasts. But I believe what it's trying to say is that the dream in which we see the beast rise out of the pool of blood and the messenger appear, that's supposed to be the nightmare of blood and beasts. And the Japanese is more explicit in saying that it's their set clothing from when we awoke from the nightmare of blood and beasts. So we are wearing this after we've woken up, and it's when we've woken up from that nightmare with the blood and beasts. I may as well examine the weapon now. I was going to wait until we got to the badges so I could look at all the beginning ones together. The threaded cane. It's one of the trick weapons of the workshop, commonly used by hunters on their duties. Sufficiently deadly as a rigid-bladed cane, but also serves as a whip when its blade is split into many. Concealing the weapon inside the cane and flogging the beast with the whip is partly an act of ceremony, an attempt to demonstrate to oneself that the bloodlust of the hunt will never encroach upon the soul. This also has I would argue, a little bit of a significant difference in Japanese. Rather than just the whip form being used as an act of ceremony, the Japanese is closer to like using it requires a beauty of form, which means like it's an elegant or refined style, and rather than attempting to demonstrate that that the bloodlust won't encroach upon the hunter, it says something along the lines of hold on, let me look it up real quick. While it imitates a cane weapon, there is a kind of beautiful elegance swinging a whip against beasts. Was the intent an attempt for oneself to become unable to drink beast hunting blood? That's a little bit of a literal translation, and what it's trying to say essentially is that by swinging whips at a distance against beasts would allow the wielder of the weapon to avoid coming into direct contact with the beast blood while out on the hunt. It's supposed to symbolize that there is some level of knowledge that coming into contact with beast blood is bad and does cause certain hunters to become bloodlusty, like filled with bloodlust faster. Which Blood Minister dialogue are you thinking about, Baro? I don't know off the top of my head. And then the Hunter Blunderbuss says, a blunderbuss created at the workshop for the hunter's line of work. Hunter firearms are specially crafted to employ Quicksilver Bullets fused with the wielder's own blood, boosting damage against beasts. The impact of this highly effective weapon counters beasts' swift movements, and its widespread is nigh on guaranteed to hit the mark. There's nothing too notable about the description in English or Japanese, although it does have like a wider spread, like parrying really isn't too much of an issue in this game in general. I just like the blunderbuss more than the pistol. There's no real better or worse weapon in my opinion. It just kind of comes down to user preference. Yeah, okay, I see what you mean with that. Yeah, the Blood Ministers talk about it being a mere bad dream definitely helps set the mood for the game and makes us question reality as we come face to face with it. And from one corpse we get pebbles. They're pretty interesting because if you look at the icon of them, they do resemble what looks to be an eye with like indented irises and like a pupil in the center. The descriptions pretty basic though. Small pebbles found throughout Yharnam can be thrown at foes. Quite thrilling. It's pretty close to the Japanese description as well. And then we've got more enemies coming at us out of corners, showing us to beware. We could drop down now, but it just kind of links up again later, so I'm not too worried about that. We see more coffins and sandbags and things like that strewn about. One of the interesting things with the pebbles, though, is that even though we do find them in some places... Oh, too far away. Like on corpses that are just strewn about, we also get them from crows, carrion crows, and the implication could be that the crows themselves have gotten it from the corpses that they've been eating. Oh. Oh, I got stuck. It's a little bit embarrassing, but it's okay. This town's finished! That's a funny comparison. Used to lure enemies so they can see you with their eyes. Oh yeah, I forgot I'm playing Bloodborne and I can just parry people with the guns. It's been a little bit since I've played. Been playing Dark Souls 1 again recently. It's been pretty fun. Playing it completely differently. I normally don't like to use like the big two-handed weapons and things like that, but I've been playing with this Zweihander, cleaning up pretty easily with that. Although I've been playing really lamely and just kind of cheesing things with the jumping attack and killing them while they're stun locked. Yes, I prefer Bloodborne's lore to Dark Souls. I don't necessarily dislike Dark Souls lore or anything like that, but Bloodborne lore is more cohesive to me. Like, I don't know, it just, there's something about it which attracts me more to the game than Dark Souls. Maybe it's just because it's the Victorian setting and things like that, or like I feel like Bloodborne has a bit more like philosophical issues presented within the game itself than is brought up in comparison to Dark Souls. Dark Souls feels more black and white to me. So when I was fighting these groups of enemies, you may have seen me taking a hit and my HP bar go down. There's a certain threshold of damage that one can take and regain their health back with what's called the rally mechanic. And the way that that works is, once you take damage, you have a set amount of time to hit an enemy to regain some of your lost HP back. The lore behind that is also tied to the things with the blood echoes and the will being what sustains the hunter throughout the hunt. And it's one of the things that I really appreciate. Not only mechanically, but just as far as much as it contributes to the ludo-narrative to the game. So if you take a hit from an enemy, you can continue to just swing at them what would appear to be recklessly from a observer's perspective. And there's actually a reason for it. Oh, I wasn't expecting the grab. That was bad on my part. Oh, I lived. I probably should have just rallied there to just bring the point back home, but... Oh, shit. Okay, this will work. Nope. So that little like pink circle that'll appear on my screen after hitting an enemy will show that I'm regaining some of the HP. And even though he's dead, I can hit him multiple times to still gain some of that HP back, which kind of just lends into the credence that like hunters, like a very good hunter will be almost impossible to distinguish from a bloodlusting hunter or a blood drunk hunter, just because the nature of hunts in and of themselves requires a hunter to be brutal and cutthroat and relentless with their attacks. So it's just one of the smaller parts of the story that or like the storytelling within the game that I really like, that good hunters are hard to distinguish from blood drunk hunters. I thought there was a mob over here. Oh no, that's the next place. Okay. So yep, another lantern by this door.
Are you that outsider? Well, sorry, but I don't want anything to do with you. Trot along, will ya?
Trot along, will ya? Yeah, so just like Guild House is able to as well, which does lend more support to the idea that dreaming hunters may all be foreign to Yharnam to begin with.
Are you that well, sorry, but I'll trot along.
You just tell solicitors to trot along. Oh, that's gonna miss, yeah. Yeah, the canes are good for hitting groups that are bunched up together.
You'd open a door on a night of a hunt. Away with you. Now.
You might be a bit more polite. I'll buy it. And just going back to the whole thing about staying vigilant, turn the corner, this guy with a gun, you can't even lock onto him. Oh, I guess I'm dumb. You can lock onto him if you know he's there, but a lot of people won't even see past this carriage because it's in their blind spot. Nothing over here, just some more coffins. I need to remember to look out for like child-sized coffins just to kind of show you guys. Oh, I tried to block like I'm in Dark Souls. Bloodstone Shard. This is our first upgrade material that we can get. Oh, where is it? A solid shard that forms in cold blood. After death, a substance in the blood hardens, and that which does not crystallize is called a bloodstone. At the workshop, these bloodstones are embedded in weapons to fortify them. So bloodstone shards are really interesting because they're not really analogous to what we can find in reality. This is a Bloodborne centric mechanic. I've got a pet theory that like the bloodstone shards might be what compose part of like the Nightmare Frontier area as well as like the Nightmare of Mensis, because you get this like kind of a granite looking structure like that kind of resembles what like the chunks and things will look like later. And of course, check your blind spots, be vigilant, don't just look for the loot, even though there aren't mimics in this game. And that's the basic rule of Bloodborne, essentially. If you're not paying attention and talking to chat, you'll just get hit by random creeps chilling in corners. Oh, shit. Fell for one of the classic blunders. Part of the reason I didn't go back to the Hunter's Dream is just because once you unlock that first gate, it's not too bad of a run back to where you were. Not gonna bother with the executioner, who's not really an executioner. Again, you don't really get anything for doing it, but killing that big guy over there is more like a sense of pride and accomplishment. Like a mini boss. It's not even a mini boss. It's just a regular minion, but you're so weak in the beginning of the game you can't tell any different. The cane, it's really easy to stun lock enemies that are small. It's one of the reasons I like it. I also like the range on it. Even though like the Saw Cleaver and the Axe are probably better weapons for like speedrunning and things like that. That dog's getting antsy. Oh. Distracted by the dog again. She doesn't like that I'm talking to the air, essentially. Not like this. Spam for days. Oh yeah, with those that big dude back there, even though they're like called executioners in the guidebook, that's the wrong title for them. Oh, this guy's not echoes. Yeah, so if an enemy steals your echoes in this game, they'll have their eyes glowing a pale bluish color. That could be a kind of hint that like there's a strong connections between like the eyes and the supernatural forces in the game. So it's something to ponder about for sure. And I keep getting distracted about my executioner comment. Yeah, so those executioners, the big hooded dudes, they are called, I think, like essentially what's dissectors in Japanese, or butchers. Like they'll just cut up corpses. They're not the same kind of executioner that's related to the faction in the Healing Church. It's a little bit of an unfortunate case of localization, perhaps. I'm not entirely sure like how they came up with that name in English. I mean, it's possible they came up with like what was in the concept art before what was finalized in the game, and executioners may have been an older name for them. I know Lance has said that executioners were like some of the last developed, oh shit, factions in the game. Oh shit. It's really hard close up. I thought there was another dog. I was confident there were two. Oh well. So this door will continue shaking even if you kill the dude on the other side in what we call top quality programming. But it's supposed to be a hint that there's something huge behind that door. Get some more dead horses, carriages, and random enemies still lying about. And a gigantic crucified Scourge Beast that almost seems to have been breaking like what it was crucified to. The beasts are often called undying, so it's a bit questionable whether or not like the beasts can even really be killed by anybody other than a hunter. The way that Yharnam is right now, the huntsmen have all been inflicted by the Scourge of the Beasts. They've been transformed themselves, and they don't really see each other as people. Well, how do I say it? Like, when you're inflicted with the Scourge of the Beast, it messes with the person's eyes, so they no longer see people as people. They project their own inner beasthood onto them. I think Poe probably did have some influence on Bloodborne design, if anything, for some of the aesthetics, although that may just be like more like supplementary material, like films and things that came later that the developers may have seen. I know that they went to Europe and explored and things like that, but just, yeah. So the Cold Blood do description, and we see the number 1 in parentheses. So the Cold Blood comes in different levels, and it's just supposed to show a progression. So at like there's 3 levels for each type of Cold Blood, and so at the Cold Blood level 4, instead of Cold Blood Dew, we get Thick Cold Blood, which is supposed to be more like rich, but the droplet of Cold Blood containing blood echoes, used to gain blood echoes. Hunters sustained by the dream and gain strength from blood echoes. They imbibe the blood with thoughts of reverence, indeed gratitude, for their victims. So, of course, with the English, we have blood echoes instead of like the dying wills of blood, which makes the whole concept of rallying and willpower a little bit more distant, although you can still kind of figure it out. The important thing with Cold Blood Dew and blood echoes is, in Japanese, cold blood is called shiketsu, which is literally dead blood or death blood, and the idea of cold blood is that within a dead body, the blood inside it will go cold because it's not being warmed any longer. So I think cold blood is a really good localization to like kind of throw people into the idea behind it. Unfortunately, it just kind of divorces that connection between death and blood and spirits and wills and echoes, and I think that's just a little bit unfortunate of a consequence, despite it being a good way to make it appeal to a different audience to begin with. The last line about imbibing blood with thoughts of reverence and in gratitude for the victims is a little bit different. The Japanese for the bottom paragraph is closer to, in accordance with the dream, hunters use dying wills of blood as their own power. May there be thanks and respect for the dead. So we're supposed to essentially be taking on the wills and the desires of the dead and allowing the dead to live through us vicariously again. And that's kind of like one of the bigger concepts throughout Bloodborne. No, I missed it. Okay, so in addition to like that big Scourge Beast way down there, throughout central Yharnam we can also see crucified on smaller crucifixes these beast patients that are going to be more easily found in Old Yharnam. It's likely that this guy had ashen blood and was taking the blood and transformed into that beast patient that the townsfolk crucified. Of course, it's unclear when these beasts got crucified, because all of the people that we've been killing so far have been transformed themselves and no longer see beasts as beasts. But it's one of the interesting, like, environmental details of the area. And then, of course, we can hear the screaming as well as with the door pounding. Looking over, we can see a brick troll, or a huntsman's minion, pounding on the door. Some more blood vials. Some more coffins lining edges and things like that, walls. Another lantern telling us we've got some NPCs here.
I don't reckon you're from round here. Well, stuck outside on a night of the hunt. Oh, you poor, poor thing. I don't reckon you're...
And then the ever so understanding Yharnamites making fun of us for being stuck out on the night of the hunt, automatically assuming we're a foreigner, possibly with good reason. You could cheat this dude's scripted AI to turn around and just go where he's normally facing to get that easy visceral, or one of the easiest kills in the game. Some more Molotov cocktails. And the torch, one of the best items in the game for looking at things related to lore. The torch. A common torch formed by wrapping a pine resin drenched cloth around the end of a long stick. Hunters choose torches not only because the hunt leads them to their darkest nooks, but also because certain creatures they encounter are possessed of a deathly fear of flame. Again, beasts fear flame, and this just kind of reinforces it. I do like the kind of callback to Dark Souls with like resins being related to torches and fire. I mean, obviously it's true to real life, but I think it just kind of is a nice reference to what we can find in some of the other FromSoft games. Yeah, with the broken crucifix, it does look like the Scourge of Beast was alive for some time after they began to crucify it, which begs the question, was it originally a person that they were trying to crucify that was transforming as it went on, or how on earth would they have gotten a truly alive Scourge Beast to sit and get crucified while it happened? And of course this is a little bit of a hidden shortcut. It'll go back to the central lamp. I'm just going to kind of ignore that for a moment. But we get some dried fountains that are inactive. Did I read? No, I never did read the Molotov. Alright. The Molotov cocktail. Explodes in raging flames when thrown against an object. One of the oldest hunter tools available in the workshop. Since the tragedy that struck old Yharnam, fire has become a staple in beast hunts, and is thought to cleanse impurity. Certain types of beasts have an abnormal fear of flame. No, I did read this, didn't I? Because I brought up the fear of flame before. Yeah. I'm losing it. So, one of the issues that came about with the name of the Molotov cocktail is that it's kind of named after a real historical figure. So for some fans, it may have broke a bit of the immersion that they're in a completely foreign world. I'll just say that within the Japanese version of the game, like all references to historic places are all just part of the localization process. Like those don't exist in the game. Like Yosefka will mention, or the fake Yosefka will mention a Hippocratic Oath, but that's just kind of her swearing as a doctor she'll treat patients. Yeah, and the Spartans were just the blades of the church in Ludwig's dialogue. And since I'm waiting for those, we can hear the music box that Gascoigne's daughter is playing. Oh shit, the dog. Search this corpse for some bullets. Blood vials on just a random bench, more dried up wells, trees growing up, grass everywhere. The whole entire town looks dilapidated and run down. We hear some howling, although it doesn't really mean too much. In one of the earlier versions of the game, you'd be able to encounter Papa G over here, Father Gascoigne, and he'd be able to join you in the hunt as you progressed. So rather than messing with the Scourge Beast right now because they're so damn strong in the beginning of the game, I'm just gonna backtrack. But this is the Great Bridge. It leads towards the Cleric Beast and the Cathedral Ward. We can see the clock tower in the distance. There's some goodies over here. Yeah, you can summon him still, but he'll be over by that fountain, the big one by the brick troll. Some more pebbles. More Bloodstone Shards. And a hidden path towards the sewers and the canal. I'm not going to worry about this right now just because it's a bit of a dead end. It goes out of the way even though we get a pretty good hunter set right there. So instead I'm just going to show off the original shortcut that I was talking about. Because it'll allow me to just go back exactly to where I was super quickly. And once I unlock the... got some dogs and kennels. And they're locked up for now. Except for the one that's possibly chasing me with the good air that somehow fell off a cliff. I don't even know how. This staircase did connect to the Great Bridge, but something broke it along the way. Almost looks like an artillery strike. I have no idea what really would have caused that. And then you see that Yharnam has lamps everywhere. So it does show like some level of sophistication of the technology of the city, despite being able to use guns. Normally this door would be locked from the other side, which is one of the reasons why I went through the shortcut first. And I'll just get the free bullets right now. Pungent blood cocktail. I'll talk about that when I come back from the bathroom. Again, I'm trying to shield like I'm in Dark Souls. And then we're all the way back to where Gilbert was. Alright guys, I'll be right back. Alright, and we're back. So, right before going back to the dream, we got the pungent blood cocktails. Mature blood cocktail that releases a pungent odor when thrown that attracts bloodthirsty beasts. A precious tool in sadly short supply. In Yharnam, they produce more blood than alcohol, as the former is more intoxicating. So, this description is very interesting because it just shows that the people of Yharnam are so attracted to the blood that they've been using that it's something that they prefer more than alcohol, which is essentially a staple of civilization. I don't think there were any real discrepancies between the English and the Japanese versions of the text. But one thing that does interest me about it in general is that it attracts the enemies away from the hunter, which makes it seem as though the hunter themselves may smell like whatever is in the pungent blood cocktails. Oh yeah, let me check to see if Garriman has any more information. Oh, and he's already gone in this playthrough, of course. Is he in the garden? Nope. He's just dipped out. And since I don't have any insight yet, the doll still remains inactive. So going back to that dark house from earlier when we unlocked that shortcut, it'll lead us right back up to the Great Bridge. And this should be a little bit self-explanatory, but the torch will light up dark areas. And this guy always gives 4 Quicksilver Bullets, so it's a pretty decent place to farm if you're low at the beginning of the game. And this note is talking about the tragedy which happened to Old Yharnam, and it says, "When the hunt began, the healing church left us, blocking the Great Bridge to the Cathedral Ward as Old Yharnam burned to the ground that moonlit night." So there is a small difference between the Japanese version of this note, and need to double check it. Okay, yeah, so the way that it makes it sound is in English is though it's possible that this could have happened on this night of the hunt, but the Japanese is a bit clearer that it was something that happened in the past, and it says the healing church intends to abandon us, like on this night of the hunt, and it compares it to the night of that moon when the Old Yharnam was abandoned in flames. Of course, they're very close. There's just some minor semantic differences, which makes it clearer that there is a link between a certain kind of moonlit night and what caused the tragedy of Old Yharnam. And of course, we know that the moonlit night is a reference to the red moon and is related to the moon presence's appearance. Alright. It didn't swing when I pressed R1 the first time. Hey, how's it going? Are you talking about the brick trolls? Yeah, they do have an interesting transformation. I was going to show one up close. I should have shown the first one, but I kind of forgot with all the descriptions of the items and stuff nearby. Oh, that's fine. Thanks for stopping in. I appreciate it. Some blood vials. Yeah, this is one of the like earliest farming spots of the game because those two dudes drop 2 blood vials really often, as well as the dark room having the Quicksilver Bullet farm as well. Yeah, I did try the zoom, and it looks like with the broadcast feature, I can't zoom while that's going on, which is a bit of a disappointment. But what are you gonna do? Oh, I should have listened to the ambient voices that they've got going on. Yeah, one of the cool things about this house in particular, while it's dark, is if you're on the bottom floor, you can hear the 2 Yharnamites up here just talking and saying random stuff. And before I forget again, I'm going to examine one of the brick trolls. So yeah, we look at them, they almost look like more like gorillas. It's easier when I have the monocular, but I don't have it right now. I like that their like little feet are splitting the seams of their shoes and sticking out like that. Some real Miyazaki foot love, of course. If we roll one of these guys over with this amazing ragdoll technology. Damn it. You can kind of see that they've got a very, very small tail starting to come out of them, as well as like all this fur and stuff. Their toes have like tiny little claws and things like that. So it shows that they've definitely been transforming. One of my headcanons about these brick trolls is that they are essentially the same dudes as what we find with the black hooded executioners. But there's nothing really to back that up. That's just kind of what makes sense to me because they're about the same size. And then, of course, this is the Great Bridge again. And those are the Scourge Beasts that are very terrifying but easy to cheese once you've unlocked the shortcut. Quite thrilling gameplay, I know. And then get some of the crows. Oh, I skipped the first set of crows, didn't I? It's whatever. I don't know why I'm forgetting to heal before I pick those up. It's whatever. The weird hump on their back? Yeah. I don't entirely know if there's like a lore reason for it. It could just be from like being deformed in general to begin with, or it just could be because it's only a partial transformation that they become so grotesque. One of the cool things about this area is, of course, like all the statues that we get around. We got a carriage up here, even though there's no on or off ramps somehow. Explain that one. And these statues often appear in, like not these ones specifically, but like the ones with the lanterns. They'll appear in the Chalice dungeons, and they've got what looks to be like little skeletons crawling up a hooded figure that's holding a lamp, although the Thumerian versions don't have the lamps. And then we've got a whole bunch of what look to be like robed women holding up candles and looking up. Could just show that like light, which can be like equivalent to illumination and enlightenment, is above them. They all look to be in pretty humble positioning, but going through this archway, we go into our like first boss arena. I can't really look at anything here. I haven't found anything too significant about the reliefs, sculptures on it, but looking up, we can see the Cleric Beast just hop out of nowhere. Hopefully I don't die. It's been a while. I did forget with the pistol, it's easier to like damage the head to perform a visceral. Broke one of its limbs. That was bad on my part. Now it's regenerating that limb. I got lucky with that. It's too greedy. Do like no damage. It's like the downside of the cane, for sure. Try to dodge. a little bit in, but I missed. Oh no, not the camera. Of course. It's fine. Like, for whatever reason, the Cleric Beast gives me trouble this early on. Oh, yeah, because the first time you go and encounter the Cleric Beast, you'll get an ambient point of insight, which activates the doll in the Hunter's dream. So now she's awake, and there's another gift from the messengers. It gives us the Beckoning Bell. So consume insight and ring the Beckoning Bell to enlist the cooperation of hunters from other worlds. And the silencing blink ends such forms of cooperation.
Hello, good hunter. I am a doll, here in this dream to look after you. Honorable hunter, pursue the echoes of blood, and I will channel them into your strength. You will hunt beasts, and I will be here for you to embolden your sickly spirit. Did you speak with German? He was a hunter long, long ago, but now serves only to advise them. He is obscure, unseen in the dreaming world. Still, he stays here, in this dream. Such is his purpose. Ah, the little ones, inhabitants of the dream. They find hunters like yourself, worship and serve them. Speak words they do not. But still, aren't they sweet?
So this is the abandoned doll, the one that Gehrman suggested we use. Her English and Japanese dialogue are very similar. There's just some small, like, honorific details that are really hard to convey the nuance of. Perhaps like one of the biggest differences, which is very minor really, is that the doll asks us to use her for our blood echoes or our wills of the dying blood, and it's just a slight difference, which makes it sound like Gehrman's dialogue about using the doll sound a lot more innocuous and less creepy, just because she pretty much begs the player for the player to use her in aiding them for channeling the blood echoes into our strengths. And then the little one she talks about is, of course, the messengers. And I think it's interesting that she points out that it's the messengers who find ones like ourselves, which suggests to me that it's more or less the messengers that have the larger role in deciding the hunter, rather than any contract that we may sign with the Blood Minister in the beginning of the game.
Farewell, good hunter. May you find your worth in the waking world.
And of course that line right there is what helps suggest that the Yharnam that we visit is the waking world. And that's why we call it the waking world as a lore community. I don't have any echoes right now because I died, so I can't level up. And I think the bell up at the top of the steps was the old hunter bell. It's not a big deal that I didn't grab it right now. I intend to stream for maybe another hour. I'm at the 2-hour mark right now, just to give everyone a heads up. That's unfortunate. Just break their AI for a second. Because why not? Oh my goodness, that missed. One of those unfortunate cases of the character facing a different direction. It happens from time to time.
Like you, stranger. I believe there's no hope. We'll know.
This stench smells like you, stranger. This stench smells like you, stranger.
Damn, we must freaking stink if they can smell us from a floor away. Although that could just be like some environmental clues that it's the scent that Yharnamites and the Scourge of Beasts hunt with more than their eyes, because these are in a dark room like this. Another thing that they'll say is like, "I'm cold, sister," or that might be one of the Brick Troll lines. I don't really remember all of the ambient dialogue off the top of my head. Alright, round two. Hopefully the camera doesn't get me again. Nope. Just me being reckless, huh? Oh yeah, I should talk about the design of the Cleric Beast, rather than just kind of doing nothing. So the Cleric Beast design might be influenced by a Native American monster called a Wendigo. And the Wendigo is an Algonquin kind of a mythological beast that eats men with a sense of like rage that can't be controlled with its bloodlust, and they're often portrayed with antlers and looking similar to deer, just kind of like the Cleric Beast has right there. Another notable feature is its ribs are pretty well exposed, showing that it's malnourished or it's got an insatiable hunger. I think it's a really good enemy design. Another aspect of just like having antlers and looking like a deer is that within certain iconography for the church and things like that, antlers are a symbol of royalty or divinity. And considering that this is a Cleric Beast, that level of divinity is worth considering with its role as a cleric. And this might just be one of the true representatives of the healing church and the blood that they're consuming, which causes people to transform. Oh, yeah, thanks. I forgot to turn that down. thought they had me. Oh, that's us. Alright, how's that sound now in relation to everything? What? How did the other one just go through me? That was so weird. Too soon. There we go. One of these days I'll get coins instead of them look like a chump. Not that dying to Cleric Beast twice doesn't make me look like a chump. Damn it. It doesn't help that I'm like using the cane, which has absolute terrible starting damage. Shit. And playing like garbage as well. Alright, I'll stop crashing on the boss and do some smarter plays, like going to talk to Eileen just to get the Bold Hunter's Mark. soon. Too soon. Wow. What am I doing? There we go. I don't think that the moon presence itself turns red, but I think it's possible. Like it might be like ambiently sucking the blood of Yharnamites and causing like the pale blood sky, so to speak. It might be like draining the red from the sky. It's a little bit unclear, but it's interesting to think about. I think it might be related to the name of pale blood and how in Japanese it's like closer to paled blood, like it's actively having that effect. And I wouldn't have thought about it. It had like that interview with Miyazaki not been titled Drained of Blood. Whether or not the moon itself can drain blood. Potentially. I think like the symbolism might be that if like the sky gets drained of blood, that blood could go like to the moon to become like the red or blood moon. And whether or not like that was intended or if it's just kind of a coincidence, I think that's a possibility as well.
Oh, you're a hunter, aren't you? Then, well, do you know of any safe places?
Unfortunately, I don't know of any safe places right now.
I've heard I have. Shutting up indoors isn't always enough. Well, if you hunters got off your asses, you wouldn't be in this mess. You're obligated to help me, you hear? So what'll it be? Are you going to tell me you're not? Yeah,
No, fuck you.
No. You're good for nothing. No respect for the elderly is what that is. Yeah. That little good you outsiders do. Go on. Admit it. You think we're all mad, don't you? Well, go and stop it. I know all your tricks.
Oh, that's what being useless gets you. Insulted. And of course, the old lady automatically assumes we're foreign. She'll blame us for the issues going on throughout Yharnam, which could just be related to church propaganda in general. It's unclear exactly why they just have random corpses hanging from the ceiling within a dry dock, which is an area where they'll repair ships out of water. One of my theories is that like by having a body suspended upside down as a hanged man, it'll allow them to collect the impurities or potentially like the blood echoes out of real corpses. And then this is one of the first friendly NPCs we find, Eileen the Hunter.
Oh, a hunter, are you? And an outsider? What a mess you've been caught up in. And tonight of all nights. Here, to welcome the new hunter. Prepare yourself for the worst. There are no humans left. They're all flesh-hungry beasts now.
So that last line about there being no humans left, they're all flesh-hungry beasts now, is pretty interesting because it's ambiguous in that whether or not people transform into beasts and whether those beasts are still people. Eileen's opinion would be no, obviously, but it's a little bit of a reveal later on that the beasts were originally people, which really shouldn't be a surprise if anybody knows anything about the werewolf mythology.
Still lingering about. What's wrong? A hunter unnerved by a few beasts? No matter. without fear in our hearts. We're little different from the beasts themselves.
And then that line about fear in their hearts is interesting when we compare it to the description for the torch or the Molotov cocktail, because it shows that beasts still do have fear. So if fear is supposed to be the separator of man and beast, what does that really imply about Eileen? Is she as knowledgeable as we may believe her to be on our first interaction?
What are you
Arguably
still
not.
doing here? Enough trembling in your boots. A hunter must hunt. What are you a hunter?
And that pretty much concludes what she has to say, and with that I'll quit the Bold Hunter's mark and go back to the Cleric Beast and level up, just because I'm playing so poorly right now. And it's got a lot of my, oh yeah, no entrance back here. It's got a lot of my echoes, which I could use. I guess the patrolman must be, yep, in there already. It's pretty funny because like it just goes to show that like our sources of authority within Bloodborne aren't really that authoritative, which kind of really is shocking. Like once you really get into the deeper aspects of the lore, like these people are your seniors in the hunt. They've been around for a while. They must have gone what you've gone through. Yet they're demonstrably wrong about pretty basic aspects of how their world functions. So it just kind of goes to like some of the deeper themes within Bloodborne of like questioning authority and their pseudoscience that's behind pretty much all of the events that have taken place with imbibing strange blood and things like that. Oh, surprised me. Thought I missed. I just gotta get my echoes and dip out without getting clobbered like an idiot. Where the hell are they? Oh, of course. I seriously thought it was going to get me for a second.
Welcome home, good. What is it? Very well. Let the echoes become your strength. Let me stand close. Now shut your eyes.
Now, one of like the weird tinfoily theories that I have in relation to like the doll and channeling the blood echoes is while she's doing it, you can hear a very faint chiming sound that is kind of present in a lot of things within Bloodborne. Like if you take Ariana's blood vial, you'll hear a similar kind of chime. It might be what's present in the Rosmarinus, things like that.
Farewell, good hunt.
The old Hunter Bell, which I forgot before. It's a key item. Right. Old Hunter Bell, one of the resonating bells that cross the gaps of worlds. This bell is cracked and stained with the blood of beasts. A human must expend insight to ring this uncanny bell. The old hunters, who have long passed from the dream, but cannot forget the feeling of the hunt, rely upon messengers to relay their thoughts. Ring the bell at their side, and they are certain to give a listen, for the night of the hunt is long and unchanging. So one of the biggest differences between this and the Japanese version is instead of calling it an uncanny bell, the Japanese refers to it as an arcane bell, or a kind of bell that is related to what we call the arcane stat. So it just kind of shows that this concept of the arcane is interconnected with pretty much everything within Bloodborne in some level, but it's just a little bit whitewashed when it comes to the English localization and harder to understand how connected it is. And yeah, it does look a little bit like Valter's bucket. But right now my dog is pretty much begging me to go outside, so I'm going to go AFK for a second just to let her out. Alright, I'm back. Sorry for the wait. That's great. surprised that one that way. And of course that time wasn't too bad. So after killing the Cleric Beast, we get the Sawhunter Badge. And it says, one of the badges crafted by the Healing Church. The silver sword is a symbol of a church hunter. Ludwig was the first of many Healing Church hunters to come, many of whom were clerics. As it was, clerics transformed in the most hideous beasts. So this definitely sets up the Cleric Beast to be one of those hideous clerics that have been transformed, and it may also distinguish the Cleric Beast as a former hunter or someone who either killed one of the hunters as a beast, although I don't necessarily find that interpretation to be too likely. It also establishes that Ludwig was the first church hunter, which separates him from Gehrman, the first hunter. There's a pretty interesting theory on Reddit that the identity of the Cleric Beast might be related to Henriette, whom we can summon in the Cathedral Ward, although there's really nothing to say whether the Cleric Beast is Henriette or not. Considering that Henriette was added with the DLC and all the other old hunters, I'm inclined to say no, despite personally liking the theory. Yeah, you think the Cleric Beast was the Kirk Hammer girl? Isn't that Henriette? Or does she wield something else? I don't really remember. I don't summon them too often. Trade in blood echoes with messengers to buy and sell items. And now with the... Oh, I guess I should have shown us before the original starting items, but now that we've beaten the Cleric Beast and got the Sawhunter Badge, it has unlocked a couple more items for us to buy from the messengers. I don't recall whether or not Antidotes are part of that, but I know the hand lantern is one of them. It's a small portable lantern. This hunting accessory provides light while leaving both hands free to hold weapons. The torch, however, provides a stronger source of light. So this is a very good item for dark spaces because you don't have to hold it in one of your hands to get some extra light. I'm going to buy it just because it's good for showing off some of the lore elements that we'll see later on. The Bold Hunter's Mark. It's a dangling upside-down rune etched in the mind of a hunter. The image upon this parchment allows one to envision the rune with clarity. It allows a hunter to awaken again without losing blood echoes, a trick that seems nearly too good to be true. And just to contrast that with the Hunter's Mark that we begin with it in our inventory, it says it's a dangling upside-down rune etched in one's mind, the symbol of a hunter. By focusing one's thoughts on this rune, a hunter loses all blood echoes but awakens afresh as if it were all just a bad dream, which kind of ties back into the Blood Minister's dialogue towards the end of the intro scene. And going back to the Bold Hunter's Mark, there's a small difference in like calling it a trick that's too good to be true in Japanese. I mean, in English, it's fine as it is. I'm just kind of mentioning it for the sake of completion. Rather than saying that, it says, from this, a hunter can redo an awakening without abandoning dying wills of blood, which are, of course, blood echoes. And then the final line is, it is a truly good, convenient technique. Just a little bit of change in flavor. Doesn't change too much, but I think that kind of thing is interesting nonetheless. And then after getting the Sword Hunter Badge, we get the Hunter Chief Emblem, which is a cloth emblem that belonged to the captain of the church hunters long ago. Opens the main gate that leads to the round plaza of the great cathedral. The main gate is shut tight on nights of the hunt and could only be opened from the other side with this emblem. In other words, the captain's return and this emblem determined the end of the hunt. That last part of the line is a bit more of like speculation or more symbolism. It doesn't necessarily mean that like as soon as any captain would walk up to it with the emblem, the hunt would automatically end. It's just that once the hunt was over, the captain could return triumphantly and present that emblem. If we look really closely at like the design on the emblem itself, it shows what we'll later find out to be a symbol of communion, which is related to, of course, drinking blood. And then the badge also allows us to buy the Kirk Hammer, which is a trick weapon typically used by healing church hunters. On the one side, an easily handled silver sword. On the other, a giant obtuse stone weapon characterized by a blunt strike and extreme force of impact. The church takes a heavy-handed, merciless stance toward the plague of beasts, an irony not lost upon the wielders of this most symbolic weapon. The Kirk Hammer's description is fairly straightforward. There's a small like thing to note about like the blunt aspect of it. It's supposed to be a reference that it does blunt type damage, and it's just a little bit hard to get that from the description itself, that it does a specific type of damage as opposed to describing how it does damage, and that there is different types of damage within Bloodborne. The repeating pistol is a repeating pistol typically used by healing church hunters. Crafted with mostly metal parts and exhibiting a complex design, the repeating pistol fires 2 shots at once, making it a ravenous consumer of Quicksilver Bullets. Should be used sparingly compared to its workshop counterpart as the trump card in one's arsenal. The description is fairly straightforward. The only difference is like the name of it. In Japanese, it's more literally called like the double barrel pistol, which is a bit more in line with its design in that it only shoots 2 as opposed to like a revolver, which can shoot repeatedly. And then the Yharnam Hunter cap says Ludwig, the first hunter of the healing church, once recruited Yharnamites to serve as hunters. This hunter's attire was made for new recruits and has excellent straightforward defense, but not nearly enough to allow an ordinary man to stand any real chance against the beasts. Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why people believe that Henriette could be the Cleric Beast, that the Sword Hunter Badge unlocks the Kirk Hammer, the repeating pistol, and we find her in Cathedral Ward, essentially behind the gates, which would allow access to like the Hunter Chief. I think it's a really good theory. I honestly do. I just don't necessarily think it's canon, unfortunately, if that makes sense. And this description establishes that Ludwig, as the first hunter of the church, recruited from like the common folk of Yharnam, and I take that to mean like he may have had a hand in establishing militias to go out and hunt beasts, which kind of transformed in the way that beasts were dealt with in general. The description's fairly similar. The only real difference is like towards the end of the line, it's more of a question. It's like, if like an ordinary man were to confront a beast, would this provide any peace of mind? So all the descriptions for them are the same, they're the exact same, it's just the names that are different. And then that's it that's new, except for the antidotes. They are small medicinal tablets that counteract poison, used to treat ashen blood, the baffling sickness that ravaged old Yharnam long ago. These tablets only provide short-term relief. The ashen blood ailment eventually triggered the spread of the beastly scourge. what it means by saying that the Ashen Blood ailment spread the beastly scourge is that because people were afflicted with poison, they would imbibe the blood vials to kind of overcome the effects of the poison, and in so doing, by imbibing the blood, it's what caused them to transform later. It's not necessarily saying that Ashen Blood is the beast plague, the beast scourge, or the cause of it. It's just something that led to it becoming more of an issue. It's interesting because if antidotes are supposed to cure poison and it's only a short-term relief in this description, it makes me wonder how the Ashen Blood would affect a hunter if we were to contract it, because antidotes completely cure poison for us, where it seems like blood is more of a temporary measure. So that's just kind of one thing that piques my curiosity into the lore of the item.
Welcome home, good hunter. What is it? Very well, let me
Let's go with a little bit more vitality for now. I usually get about 15 vitality and endurance before I level my other stats.
Farewell, good.
Alright, and with this, I don't think Gammon was back, despite the doll's dialogue. Yeah, no. He really dipped out early on me this game. Alright, I'm gonna let my dog back in while it's loading. So I'll be right back. Alright, we're back. Sorry for the delay. Always have to clean off her feet because it rained. They get muddy. Alright, that way is where Eileen was. I'm not too worried about going directly there right now. That one path that I didn't go down earlier will loop back into it. But it's kind of a dead end unless you're going to go that way, so that's why I skipped it before. we're gonna go back up there and get the hunter set that I skipped. Oh yeah. Get to use that hand lantern. Hard to kill both of them at once, especially this early on, which is why I kited it back over here. If there's only one, I wouldn't care. You could just visceral them or get behind them real easy. Oh, yeah, I suppose, yeah, screw it. It's not too important. Over at the Great Bridge where we killed the Cleric Beast, there's a door that cannot be accessed that would lead to the Cathedral Ward, and it's closed because the healing church has blocked off the town, and which was referenced in that note in the dark room, like about the healing church intending to abandon them again. They're doing it tonight as well, with the Night of the Red Moon present, although most people wouldn't know about that because it's being hidden to us by Ram. Screw it, I'm not going to wait for that guy. So that note leads to, or that door that's closed leads to the Cathedral Ward, but it's completely blocked off. And I should have talked to Gilbert again, because he'll kind of talk about it, about the way being closed, and suggest for us to come through the sewers like we are right now. If I don't get to it, like this run, I can definitely do it after we beat Gascoigne, because I'm going to be going back to the clinic anyway. This is where we get our first free hunter set. You don't have to kill any bosses for it. It's pretty good. One of the better starting sets to begin with. So yeah, most stats get improved by about 30 in each point. I'm going to read it after I kill the beast that's still lingering about here. Then of course we've got giant rats, another From staple. We can surmise that through the beast blood, they've grown to enormous sizes as well. Same thing as the crows. For some reason, the rats like to drop throwing knives, which really doesn't make any sense. A silly interpretation would be like saying Hedrick liked to use the rats as practice for throwing knives. That's just kind of more of a joke than a real interpretation. So one of the other interesting things about coming through the canals or the sewers or whatever these are really called is along the walls we've got these statues of messengers holding lanterns, which kind of shows a potential religious tie to the people of Yharnam and messengers in general. And it does show that at some level they must have some kind of knowledge about messengers and lanterns and things like that, although it's never clear exactly how much they do know and how messengers might be related to the Healing Church or their religious beliefs, or whether or not they predate them. And these sewer creatures all have their legs like either burned off or cut off. It's not entirely clear. They've got really long arms and they're covered in fur, showing that they've been transformed. They're not quite beasts, and their internal names are just called like burned corpse or something like that. So it's a little bit unclear how they came to be. They might have been victims of previous hunts, but they might have even been crucified, considering that they're all burnt. Pretty sure they were like burnt corpse, like literally burned corpse. So like the implication is that these things are already dead, and it should be obvious considering how they're dismembered. I mean, my memory could be wrong about that. Going up this way leads to Gascoigne's daughter, where we heard the music box from before, and it opens up a relatively minor shortcut. Oh yeah, Herbert, one thing that I did want to mention in like relation to the red moon in the sky would be they could have always just gone with like a full moon for their motifs. So not necessarily saying that like it's a definite case of the red moon having absorbed blood or whatever from the sky. I just think it's interesting that it does line up that way and that interpretation can be possible. And from this corpse we gain a madman's knowledge, one of the more important items of the game, since we can use these skulls to gain insight. And it's the skull of a madman touched by the wisdom of the Great Ones, used to gain insight. Making contact with eldritch wisdom is a blessing, for even if it drives one man, it allows one to serve a grander purpose for posterity. This description, on its own, I think it's a great localization in terms of like setting the atmosphere for a game, but unfortunately I think it kind of leads a lot of players astray in terms of interpreting the lore, partially because it comes down to like one term which is used, which is the eldritch wisdom. Eldritch horror is associated with H.P. Lovecraft and like cosmic horror in general, and it tends to make people stop their interpretations of the story a little bit early, I believe. Oh yeah, water, corpse, beast. It's probably just like a undead beast in water. So yeah, going back to the whole Eldritch Wisdom thing, this kind of relates back to the old Hunter Bell calling it an uncanny bell. The term Eldritch Wisdom comes from Shinpi in Japanese, which is what they used for the arcane stat. Now my argument would be, since this should be understood as an arcane bell, like the madman's knowledge, what should be the important takeaway is that it's related to the arcane stat, which is something that is brought up quite often in the Japanese version of the game, but it's just been translated so varyingly in English. It's really hard to piece together how connected everything is as a result of that. And thanks for checking that for me. Oh, yeah, I forgot to mention that this brick troll is holding a statue. Just big old statue. Smack your face with it. And then...
Wretched outsider. Trying to fool me to open this door. Heavens, the depths of depravity.
Of course, another person inside identifies this as an outsider right away. I said, oh yeah, I mentioned that way earlier, but with like the red moon and things like that, it's also interesting that it's a red moon that they went with as opposed to just like a full moon, which is normally associated with the werewolves. I'm not necessarily saying like that's like the main reason that I think like the moon could be interpreted as absorbing blood or redness from the rest of the sky, but just I think that it's interesting that like that kind of interpretation is possible as a result of that. So this opens up the shortcut back to the plaza with the brick troll pounding on the door and the fountain that we were at much earlier. And we can hear the music box playing again, and on this side of the gate we can access the NPC behind it.
Who are you? I don't know your voice, but I know that smell. Are you a hunter? And please will you look for my mum? Daddy never came back from the hunt, and she went to find him, but now she's gone too. I'm all alone and scared.
So of course we can choose to find the girl's mother or refuse. We're gonna find her because why not?
Oh, thank you. My mum wears a red jeweled brooch. It's so big and beautiful. You won't miss it. Oh, I mustn't forget. If you find my mum, give her this music box.
Then she gives us the tiny music box.
It plays one of Daddy's favourite songs, and when Daddy forgets us, we play it for him so he remembers. Mum's so silly running off without it. My mum wears a red jeweled brooch. It's so big and beautiful. You won't miss it. Oh, and if you find her, give her this music box. Please, I know you can do it.
Oh yeah, it's a consumable. The tiny music box. A small music box received from a young Yharnam girl plays a song shared by her mother and father. Inside the lid is a small scrap of paper, perhaps an old message. Two names can be made out, however faintly: Viola and Gascoigne. And of course this is a huge like environmental clue and a foreshadowing of what's to come. Like, while we're looking for her mother, we're going to run into her father and all of the joy that brings. Yeah. And this is, I'll just go forward the original way. So yeah, after you get the hunter set, you can just come back up here and like go through the shortcut to go through the front way of the aqueduct and meet Eileen again. And that's kind of like the more direct way to go since it comes from the central Yharnam lantern. Yeah, I've got Discord open while it's up. I just tried to shield again. Alright, I got that. The old woman and Eileen won't say anything different, so I'm not going to worry about them. Got the patrolling guy. And now, these guys are definitely more transformed than the rest of the Yharnamites. It's a little bit hard to show without the monocular, but you can barely see like horns coming out of its head. It's a hell of a lot more bestial in nature. More fur coming out of it. It's a longer, more proportionate limbs though. It's closer to a Scourge Beast than a Yharnamite is what I would argue, despite its somewhat humanoid appearance. Oh yeah, like in relation to the Red Moon in general, like it's definitely a trope for things like being a hunter's moon amongst other things. But I just think in conjunction with like the concept of draining blood specifically, and that the whole idea with Miyazaki's interview with Future Press about the sky being the color of a body drained of blood, I think that's why I would give like that interpretation a bit more weight than just I normally would have. Just because like yeah, it's just definitely very interesting like storytelling, and it just kind of baffles me how much of it might be coincidence versus like intended. And if it's all intended, which it very well may be, it's just crazy amount of detail. And if it's not intended, well, that's a little bit unfortunate, but still cool nonetheless that we as players can give it that kind of meaning. I'm trying to remember which side is which weapon, or which item. I think the one with the rats is where we get the... Nope. Yep, the saw spear. More throwing knives, and I'll look at those in a second as well. Throwing knife. Throwing knife with a finely serrated blade, one of the old hunter Henrik's favorite weapons. Does not cause a great deal of damage to beasts, but with deft use can distract attackers and keep them at bay. I mean, that's pretty true. They're not very effective for like most combat within the game. It's interesting that they tie this weapon to Henrik. I don't even really remember if he uses them in his fight now that I think about it, but it's just kind of some funny environmental lore detail. Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's kind of like true of anything that you use deconstructivism on. But definitely works. Like I remember when I was in high school reading like what is it, Lord of the Flies, my teacher going on about like how society is represented through the conch shell, and the more that it fades, the more their society degrades, which sure it might be true, but it could also just be like it's out of the water and it's just fading. Saw Spear, one of the trick weapons of the workshop, commonly used by those who dedicate themselves to the hunt. This saw, effective at drawing the blood of beasts, transforms into a medium-range spear. The saw, with its set of bloodletting teeth, has become a symbol of the hunt, and only grows in effectiveness the more grotesquely transformed the beast. I'm pretty sure that description is straightforward, both in English and Japanese. Not too many differences. Kind of also hints at like serration damage being a thing. Got another Madman's Knowledge. That's 2 that you can find throughout the world. The other was by like the shortcut with the little girl. And if you're ignoring the Cleric Beast, you could use this Madman's Insight or Madman's Knowledge to gain the insight necessary to go level up in the Hunter's Dream. And this takes us back to where we came down before with all the rotting corpses and the shortcut ladder. And some more crows. Really? There's a puzzle in Silent Hill 3 that expects you to read Hamlet? It's pretty brutal. And then there's an item over here as well as a kind of hidden enemy. More Bloodstone Shards. This ladder will take us up towards where Gascoigne is. Should probably heal before dealing with this pig. It has poison breath for whatever reason. They're called man-eater pigs, so we could assume that by eating enough of the corpses it comes across, its breath may become more foul and dank, leading to its poisonous nature. We get our Sawhunter Badge off just a corpse of a hunter over here. And some Cold Blood Dew, although of a higher quality than what we have normally seen. Now, back here there's another ladder towards Gascoigne's Arena, or the Tomb of Odon. This little pit right here doesn't lead to anywhere. Unfortunately, it makes me wonder if within earlier versions of the game or within earlier ideas of development there could have been an elevator that brought one from Old Yharnam and the Church of the Good Chalice back up towards Central Yharnam and the Tomb of Odon, but it's never really explained. Lance McDonald said he never found anything to confirm or deny that idea. And this is a shortcut back to the Central Yharnam lantern. It's not going. There it goes. And if we look down, we can see that's where the Church of the Good Chalice is. We fight the Bloodstone Beast over there. Looking back that way, we can kind of see Josefka's clinic, although it's very, very hard to make out. Up there is the Great Bridge, and that's Cathedral Ward. So we're not quite as high up in terms of altitude. And speaking of altitude, Central Yharnam is meant that it's central in terms of altitude. It took me kind of an embarrassing long time to figure that out, but down below Old Yharnam, it's the lowest point. Central Yharnam is in the middle point of the map, and Cathedral Ward's the highest level. And speaking of Old Yharnam, we can see like the steps going down towards the Church of the Good Chalice. We don't really see the river that's supposed to be next to it. Oh, maybe over there, kind of behind those buildings. That right there, past my head, is where Jura's tower would be. The spires, and like the entrance over there that we would walk into. So the environment for the game really does line up very well, all things considered. They did put a lot of thought in making the map layout appear consistently throughout each area, even if they're low polygon versions. It's probably a bad idea. Oh no, it worked out. Some people have thought for a really long time that when the hunter does their visceral attack, their hands will transform into a kind of beast claw. Unfortunately, that isn't true. Lance McDonald on his streams shows that when you do the visceral attacks, your hands stay the same, your weapons just shrink and become tiny, that you can see. It's pretty funny. And going forward, we can see the arena for Father Gascoigne. It's the Tomb of Odon. And he's weak to the tiny music box because it stirs up sentimentality for him.
Beasts all over the shop. You'll be one of them, sooner or later.
It's a weird camera transition. Of course, Father Gascoigne's eyes are covered as a symbol of his being afflicted by the plague. Oh, that didn't get him. And it was too close. I forgot to equip Molotovs, whatever.
What's that smell? The sweet blood. Oh, it sings to me.
Really?
It's enough to make a man sick.
And then once he's transformed like this, you can only use the music box once more to be effective. Then after killing Father Gascoigne, we get the Ridden Tomb Key. Some small differences between his English and Japanese dialogue is it's a bit more clear in Japanese. He thinks we're already a beast, despite being human, even at the beginning of the fight. And if he kills you while he's still in human form and can speak, he'll say, impersonating man until the end, as a question, which just shows that he really thinks that the player is a beast, and he's so consumed with the hunt that he can't resist it. The smell of the blood forces him to continue because he's just taken so much of it and become bloodthirsty and blood drunk. Yeah, I agree. One of the, like, his transformation is like one of the cooler aspects of like the boss fights in general and from games. Going up to the roof and dropping down, we find a woman with a certain red jeweled brooch. This would be the little girl's mother, Viola, and of course Gascoigne was Father Gascoigne, whom we just killed. I think one of the best aspects of Gascoigne as kind of like a starter or introductory boss would be that his style of fighting is supposed to be symbolic of how hunters are supposed to hunt in general. It's very aggressive and controlled and in your face. You're supposed to strike very quickly in controlled explosive movements to maximize your damage potential and rally potential, as well as using your gun to keep enemies at a distance if they're getting too close, or to put them into disarray and open avenues for attack. He does a very good job of differentiating combat between typical combat found in Dark Souls versus the faster pace, aggressive, relentless nature of what's in Bloodborne. Alright, it's been a little bit over 3 hours. I think this has been a pretty good run despite all the Cleric Beast hang-ups. Glad I one-shot Gascoigne for everyone. I want to thank you, and before I go, I'll just read the new item we got. Odon Tomb Key. Key to the gate that blocks the Tomb of Odon. Beyond the tomb, Odon Chapel can be found in the center of Cathedral Ward. Only today the church is abandoned, and some say the residents of Odon have all gone mad. Of course, it's more or less referring to the chapel dweller, despite him only being one resident of the church ahead who's gone mad. But it's just a bit of a hint of what's to come. Before I go, I think it's important to kind of look at some of the environmental details we can find here. We see some of the corpses that Gascoigne was butchering before the fight began. We see a gigantic monument to a figure that might be Odin. It's unfortunately unclear, and a lot of graves and tombstones scattered about, with coffins lining the walls as well. I think one of the cooler bits of hidden lore within the game would be what's on the base of the statue itself. It's hard to see without the monocular, unfortunately, but over there, kind of by where the tip of my cane is, there's a depiction of the hunt of Saint Hubert, the Catholic patron saint of hunting, and the stag that he saw while he was out on the hunt, which caused him to kind of convert more towards heavier religious leanings. It's the inspiration of the Jägermeister deer as well, that the deer was a symbol of the hunt, and while he was hunting on a Sunday, it was kind of a divine providence that gave him a revelation of the proper way to hunt through like God's blessing and God's directives. And one of the key aspects of Saint Hubert was he was also given a stole, or like a scarf, that was supposed to cure rabies or madness or frenzy within real life legends. And when we compare that kind of symbology or symbolism to Father Gascoigne, who's characterized by the long shawl given to him by the Healing Church, it shows that within Bloodborne at least, religion isn't necessarily the escape from earthly terrors that might be present within this game. So it kind of paints religion as being ineffective within the lore of the game. Alright everybody, I thank you for joining me. I'm not entirely sure how often I'll be streaming and everything like that, but I'll be sure to try to do this more regularly if there's more interest. So I just want to thank everybody for showing up, and have a good day.